I'm so honored to be introducing Mary tonight. Mary has a PhD in history and has been teaching for years in the Fresno State Women's Studies Department. But for some reason, Mary decided that going back to school to study creative writing with professors who aren't as smart as her was a good idea. I will forever be thankful for her poor choices, because Mary's writing makes me smarter and a better teacher. It challenges me and thrills me as a reader because they honestly believe she's doing stuff in this thesis that nobody else is doing. I still remember reading Mary's application materials and talking with my former colleague, John Hales, who's here tonight. And both of us realizing that Mary was working on a project that was unlike anything either of us had seen before in the MFA program. We've had students who write about Fresno State football or the biology of wine, but this was a project ostensibly about Mary's house. There would also be a research-driven exploration of the life and legacy of the designer William Morris and the arts and crafts movement he inspired. It would not be a traditional biography. It would also never be a memoir. It would be something that's hard to explain. And as he was known to do, John immediately went out and read anything he could find on William Morris so that he could really help Mary with her work. I, on the other hand, asked John to give me important stuff in a bullet point list. That's not really true, but sounded good. I believe that at its best, creative nonfiction tells a story about consciousness, a narrative of thought where ideas are like characters and that they take on lives of their own and begin growing, expanding, and changing. And reading Mary's work is like sitting down in a conversation with a consciousness that is equal parts lyrical and logical, a mind that is rambling across a historical landscape and that is also simultaneously living inside her house in Fresno. A house with its own unique character and quirks. We see Mary pushing ideas around on the page about art and beauty and morality. And we watch these ideas accrue meaning, gathering momentum as they roll toward a thesis that has certainly lived up to its promise to be something different, something wonderful and unpredictable and wholly unique. The Irish writer Chris Arthur has an essay called Entrance that is entirely about the entrance to a family country estate. In it, Arthur lingers and luxuriates in the entrance space, keeping us anchored physically in place while the thinking ranges wild, taking us to faraway locales, intellectually and emotionally. Mary's writing does this too. It puts you in a trance of thought and place. And in one of my favorite pieces of hers, written after her visit to Morris's former home in England, to what is now a tourist attraction, she spends most of the essay on the front porch of the house, just kind of wandering around and ruminating in a way that reminds me of classical essayists and philosophers that I grew up loving. There's something about Mary's work that feels both old and new, both wise and playful, and it's been a true joy working with her these last few years. Please join me in welcoming and celebrating Mary Coomes.
Thank you, Stephen, for that lovely introduction. And it's great to be here. Thank you all. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Thanks for attending, everyone, and to the organizers, especially Jefferson. I'd also like to thank Stephen, my chair, my committee, and all the faculty that have been so wonderful and who have taught me so much in this program, especially John Hales, Bryn Saito, and Brenna Wolmer, Benita Blackburn also. So thank you. And I've been thinking lately about the moment that I got the phone message from John saying that I'd gotten into the program, and I was just so ecstatic. And I still just feel so, so lucky to have been part of this and to have had such wonderful teachers and wonderful peers. So thank you. A big thanks to my husband, Paul, and my friends who have supported me and cheered me on through this, and sometimes proofread. And to my writing buddies, Loretta. And so as Stephen mentioned, my thesis is about home, the arts and crafts movement, its founder, William Morris. Morris was influenced by the pre-Raphaelite painters, friends of his, And these folks figure in the piece that I'm going to be reading tonight. This is a reworked excerpt of an essay about some members of his circle that don't get a lot of attention, namely the women. So Jane Morris is William Morris's wife, and Lizzie Siddall is married to the pre-Raphaelite painter Dante Gabriel Rossetti. So this is kind of a collage with subheadings for each segment. So it's more impressionistic, so don't feel like you need to keep track of details or dates. Just kind of let it wash over you. Okay, the title is Boxes. Quote, "The poet lives a daydream. We see it open chests or condensed cosmic wealth in a slender casket. If there are jewels and precious stones in the casket, then the stones will speak of love, of course, but of power too, and fate." Gaston Bachelard, Poetics of Space. Heavy lifting. "There will always be more things in a closed than an open box," writes phenomenologist Gaston Bachelard. But what's the difference between a box in the Bachelardian sense and a hole? The endless possibilities in the closed box make the inside infinitely large, swallowing. Holes can be that way too. Rabbit holes, wormholes. Wormholes, the cosmic kind, take you places. Wormholes, the earthly kind, are the opposite. Loss, death, and ending, though they too represent movement and a very small dwelling place too. To be clear, I'm not talking here about boxes in the Shakespearean sense. He wears his honor in a box unseen. And this is not the writer letting us, quote, read their treasure boxes. This is about the box, the drawer, the chest. I aim to be, as Bachelard says, a poet of furniture. Or no, maybe more like the mover hired to pack up the house, pulling out objects, images, histories, shuffling them into their proper boxes, stacking them. This goes next to this, goes next to this. Yes, a mover who writes some poetry on the side. In his famous chapter entitled Drawers, Chests, and Wardrobes, Bachelard writes that without these objects, life would lack a model of intimacy. We experience not just the concept of inside through these structures, but the physical reality of it. Dresser drawers, beautiful boxes that we keep on the mantle, these speak of the need for privacy. They have an inside, they close and latch, they open. We reach a hand inside the drawer and our fingers sort the contents. Softness of socks, t-shirts, but what's this? The fingertips touch the smooth pool of a glass vial. What kind of substance hides here? Illicit or prescribed? Or the fingers feel the edge of a small metal picture frame, a loved one or a love lost. Inside the drawer at the very back, the nature of what you'll find is known, even if the particulars are not. Stunner. Jane Burden Morris, wife of William Morris, embodied the beauty ideal of the pre-Raphaelite painters, for whom she modeled from the 1860s on. In 1848, her husband's friend and mentor, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, formed the 7-member pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, 8-member if you count Dante's partner, Elizabeth Lizzie Siddall. Their goal to revolutionize art, no more copying Raphael's aesthetic conventions. Light emanates from here, figures go here, colors just so. They would make honest paintings. Thus inspired, Dante, Walter Howell Deverell, Sir John Everett Millais, and others became great painters in the 1850s. Their contribution was seen as, but no, I digress. This is not about Dante, not about John or Walter. It's about Jane, or Jane-ness, anyhow. Tall and statuesque, with long limbs, large hands, and the ever-lauded graceful neck, Jane's narrow face was set with a strong jaw. Her pallor only made more compelling those full red lips and the great gray eyes, so overwhelming in their beauty, as the newspapers described her. Her expression, instead of sweet and passive, had a hard-edged melancholy, like she'd just taken a bite of something nauseating, but she just might recover enough to bite someone or throw up on their shoes. All of this, plus a sea of thick, wavy brunette hair when pink-cheeked blondes were preferred, made her rise to iconic beauty unlikely. Her sister was the pretty one, and in a world where beauty pegged a woman's chances on the marriage market, Jane probably counted on making a mark in the world with her strong hands, not her striking looks. A stable man's daughter, Jane was 17 in 1857 when Dante, always on the hunt for new stunners, as he called his models, spotted her in an Oxford theater. Dante cast her as Queen Guinevere in the medieval-inspired Oxford Union murals that he and William were painting. Beauty like hers is genius, Dante pronounced, and commenced obsessively sketching and painting Jane for the rest of his life, as though in capturing her, he might draw that quality into himself. Icon. I studied Jane in William's only oil painting, Belle Isoult. On the back he wrote, "I love you, but I cannot paint you." I studied her in all those drawings and paintings by Dante. After a while, I began to see Jane's likeness everywhere, and I mean everywhere. 19th century stained glass windows, Art Nouveau paintings, video game covers. The greeting card fairy queens at the Wiccan soap and candles store stared out at me. Jane. At first I thought I was imagining things. Of course they weren't all her, but they sure looked like close relatives. How could my visual landscape suddenly clutter up with Jane's? A decade after her first appearance in art as Guinevere, her type had come to define pre-Raphaelite beauty. And once you start examining these images and their second generation in Art Nouveau, there's definitely a look. I sometimes see a painting and think, yes, that's Jane, only to find it's another of Dante's models. Hair color helps. Maybe it's Jane, brunette, or his sometime housekeeper or sometime lover, Fanny Cornforth, redhead, or his wife, Lizzie Siddall, with her famous flowing dark red hair. As writer Henry James said upon meeting Jane, it's hard to say whether she is a grand synthesis of all the pre-Raphaelite pictures ever made, or they a keen analysis of her, whether she is an original or a copy. Casket number 1. In a big glossy book that catalogs Jane and William's famous red house and its furnishings, curator Tessa Wilde devotes paragraphs to the richly painted jewel cask, that is, a jewelry box, kept in Jane's bedroom. The box resembles a teeny Gothic chapel, its lid forming the steeply pitched roof. Wooden, with iron frame, hinges, and clasp, the casket has 2 locks. Experts confirm that Lizzie Siddall painted the seams on the box. A king and queen face one another, symbolizing love and marriage. The picture references an early 1400s illuminated manuscript, The Book of the Queen by Christine de Pizan, medieval Europe's most famous, or maybe only famous, female writer. According to Wilde, Dante and William knew these images from their trips to the British Museum. Though it's not mentioned, somehow Siddall knew them too. After all, she painted them. When Siddall began painting in 1854 with Dante as her teacher and her lover, she, or at least her face, was already famous from pre-Raphaelite paintings. For Deverell, she was Viola in Twelfth Night. For Holman Hunt, she was Sylvia in Valentine rescuing Sylvia from Proteus. For Millais, she was Ophelia in that famous 1852 painting of Shakespeare's striking tragic beauty. If your mind's eye sees Ophelia floating on her back, down billowing on the flower-strewn surface of a dark pool, vivid pale face, red hair, a swirling mantle just below the water, it's probably Millais, or I should say, Siddall. How to capture Hamlet's lover, the painter wondered, just as the water pulls her under. His model must float in a tub of water for hours, though no one would notice when the warming candles underneath blew out. She never quite recovered from the pneumonia, though one doctor said that the cause of her perpetual weakness was not organic. She didn't eat. Anorexia nervosa, then the prescribed laudanum, models, the original heroin chic. In any case, Though the fact seemed quickly purged from history, I gradually realized that through the 1850s, well before Jane, Siddall's image upended old notions of feminine beauty. The dark flowing red hair, the strong bone structure, and thin, almost gaunt face, Lizzie. Again, I see all those fairy queens, those saints in stained glass. It was after Ophelia, amidst the acclaim over Millet's painting, that Dante asked her to model only for him. And maybe she didn't want to model like before anyhow. Siddall's artwork held such promise that pre-Raphaelite patron John Ruskin paid her a stipend, and her paintings were included in the first major pre-Raphaelite exhibit. Still, after nearly a decade of engagement to Dante, she slipped out of town on holiday and didn't return. In Sheffield, she entered art school, making her way without Dante's false promises and his eye for stunners, and without Ruskin's money. But then, just beyond their grasp and beginning of a life of her own, she fell ill. Fate took a turn. Boxes and gutters. Comic panels, or boxes, contain visual information of all sorts. Their sole job is to make you look, absorb. Example, in the first box, a lacy negligee drapes across an open drawer. All drawers in comics are always open. In the next box, the negligee lies in a heap on the floor next to an unmade bed. Real movement in a comic occurs not within each box, but in the space between them, in what's called the gutter. In box 1, someone has brought out a nightie. In box 2, something has happened to the nightie. The side-by-side arrangement of panels suggests sequence and prompts the reader to fill in the missing information. How did this really end up on the floor? Each reader fills in a different seduction, but the author has forced us down one path. This sidekick work, performed as our eyes skim from one panel to the next, is called closure. And our minds do just that. They cough up the gaps in information to make a complete story or scene. Reading such boxes, one experiences movement, but is not necessarily moved. Rarely is a comic panel a wormhole, transporting the reader deep into their own past, to some moment tenderly or guiltily boxed up inside. That is to say, a comic panel is no baccalaureate box. Stunner number 1. In 1858, Dante made a pen and ink sketch of a woman in profile. A simple line comprises the face, the largish scribble, the full lips, the thick flowing hair, the long neck. Is this Jane? He had just met her in the fall of 1857 and soon began sketching studies for Guinevere. Across the bottom, Dante wrote the title, Stunner number 1. Does the number denote his first sketch of her? Or is this Lizzie? She too had thick flowing hair, strong bone structure, and the nose. Could number 1 mark Lizzie's importance in his life? Or perhaps her place in his chronology of stunners? Icon number 2. Quote, every secret has its little casket. Bachelard. We don't really know whether the jewel casket from Jane's bedroom was originally hers or if it belonged to Lizzie and then was passed along by Dante after his wife's death, perhaps during his long affair with Jane. We do know that the jewelry box was likely modeled on the reliquary of Saint Ursula, which Dante had seen when he traveled to Bruges in 1849. Ursula's reliquary, the small casket where the Holy Woman's bones and bits were stored for veneration on special days, was shaped like a mini Gothic chapel, just like the jewel casket. We don't know what Lizzie or Jane thought about Saint Ursula's hagiography, an outlandish story of chastity and sacrifice. They say she was a Christian princess from southern England who set sail around 383 along with 11,000 virgins in service to meet her betrothed, a pagan governor. When her storm-tossed ship finally landed on the continent in praise, Ursula took a pilgrimage to Cologne alongside the Pope. Long story short, there she met her death, and a pile of bones marked the mass martyrdom of Ursula and all those virgins. Now, 11,000, that is a lot of virgins. Many speculate a translation error. Others double down on martyrdom is a miracle not to be questioned. And there's something that happens when you claim such a big number. Too many to count as individuals, really. Saint Ursula absorbs them all into her own singular image of martyrdom. Ursula number 3. As a child, I caught a snippet of a TV show about John Derrick, a minor film star beginning in the 1940s and later a director. He was married in the 50s to actress Ursula Andress. This Ursula was no icon of virginity, but a sex symbol, and no pre-Raphaelite beauty, but a modern stunner with long blonde hair, large light eyes, tiny sculpted nose, and curvy bikini figure. The show then flashed on an image of Linda Evans, John's second wife, with her long blonde hair, large light eyes, tiny sculpted nose, and curvy bikini figure. Then on Bo Derek, perhaps the reason for the TV show in the first place, since she became a famous beauty with the movie 10. The premise and attitude of the movie is summarized in the number, a score of perfect beauty. Strange thing was, Bo too had long blonde hair, large light eyes. Do doppelgangers come in threes? A comic, The Woman Succumbs. Panel number 1. The woman pulls a small vial from the back of a wardrobe drawer. Panel number 2. The woman lies sprawled across a bed, mouth agape, mass of red hair sweeping over the covers as the vial slips from her outstretched open hand. How they met themselves. Neil Gaiman published a comic as part of Winter's Edge called How They Met Themselves. The comic shows a couple walking in a park. Suddenly, they run straight into an identical couple, alike in every way, right down to the outfits. The couple is Dante Gabriel Rossetti and Lizzie Siddall. Gaiman based the cartoon on a painting by Dante of the same name. Dante worked on this apparently just after his marriage to Lizzie, odd bordering on offensive though it was to do so. Meeting a doppelganger signals impending death. Lizzie, suffering from illness and laudanum addiction for years, was dying when after a 9-year engagement, after watching him eye the younger models, after leaving him to go to art school, Dante finally went to her sickbed with a marriage license, and she accepted. They wed in May of 1860. But she didn't die, not just then. Boxes, stanzas, frames. There's a poem from 1896 by Christina Rossetti, Dante's sister, entitled In an Artist's Studio. She writes, one face looks out from all his canvases, a saint, an angel. Every canvas means the same one meaning, neither more nor less. He feeds upon her face by day and night, and she, with true kind eyes, looks back on him. When I first read these lines, I puzzled, who is this angel, this saint, Jane or Lizzie? All I know is that a canvas, a mind's eye, is a small place to exist, but it's never too late to refuse the frame. Thank you.